Britain's Reform UK party leader Nigel Farage says the new Prime Minister does not have a plan to deal with the immigration. He made the comment as he visited Basildon on Saturday, following his election to Parliament the day before, adding that the outgoing Conservative Party's Rwanda plan, which Starmer announced he was scrapping, was never going to work. He was visiting another newly elected Reform MP, James Mark Murdoch, who represents South Basildon and East Turok, as the Reform Party picked 5 seats overall. Reform, founded as the Brexit Party in 2018 and renamed in 2022, had not previously won any seat in an election.
Well, he said he would do it. At least he's kept a promise, I suppose. Look, Rwanda was never going to work. What Keir Starmer is proposing, which is to, tackle the gangs, well, frankly, the last government were doing that for the last few years. It's not going to work. At the minute, it's wild and windy, but we do have some pretty strong first-hand accounts that as soon as we get a calm spell, they'll be crossing the English Channel in their thousands, and let's face it, Keir Starmer does not have a plan to deal with it. It's all about change, apparently, but I can't see what change is actually going to happen. We've changed personnel, we've changed management. I'm not sure we fundamentally changed government. And Starmer himself, standing outside Number 10, he's just become the Prime Minister, he's been to see the King, seems to be so lacking himself in his own policies, perhaps in his own abilities, that during a 9-minute speech to the nation, he looked down at his notes 150 times. Every 3.8 seconds, the Prime Minister had to look down at his notes. Doesn't suggest to me that they're that confident. Well, they've put us through 4 years of a psychodrama where the Conservatives fight each other, and here we are, just a few hours after the election, and already they're tearing chunks out of each other. Some people think Nigel Farage is a really good bloke, others think he's the devil. They have never really decided where they stood on Brexit. Honestly, I don't think it matters who they pick as leader. This party is split down the middle. They call it a broad church. Well, it's a broad church with no common shared religion.
Well, the controversial asylum deal between the UK and Rwanda faces imminent collapse after the new Prime Minister Keir Starmer announced that Labour government would scrap it. The UK government has spent more than £320 billion on the scheme to send asylum seekers to Rwanda. While some in Rwandan political circles feel relieved, others argue that the East African country should not have been burdened with the UK's political issues in the first place. Well, in Kigali, the Rwandan capital city, preparations were in full swing. Rwanda was ready to receive immigrants from the UK under the controversial partnership between the two governments. Hostels have been built and equipped with recreational amenities, and over 150 people had been hired and trained to work in these facilities. The first flight to Rwanda was scheduled for July 24. That's if the Conservatives had been re-elected. Reactions are mixed now in Kigali. While some welcome the developments, others say that it should not be blamed, that Rwanda should not be blamed for the UK government's misguided policy.
It's a relief for those people who have been scared of coming to Rwanda, because some of those people say that they would even commit suicide if they're being forced to come to Rwanda. So it's been a great concern for us. Personally, I voted against this bill in Parliament, or as my colleague. So my party, the Democratic Party of Rwanda, has been opposed to this bill from the beginning. And we are happy that the Labour Party, which has also been opposed to this bill, has won the elections. So we are against this bill, or have been against this bill, because we believe that the UK has more resources than Rwanda and has more employment opportunities than Rwanda, and also has an obligation to receive refugees, the people who come to them, like Rwanda has a responsibility to receive refugees who come to us. So we as a party are not against the refugees, but we would like to receive refugees who choose to come to us. So countries like the UK, the Germany, and the Denmark who want to take off their own responsibility and throw it to us, we are not happy with that.
What image does it give of Britain, the Great Britain, to expel some members of the Commonwealth who have sought refuge in its country? What image does it give of the country that is expelling them? Otherwise, there's no image problem for the country that receives them. Why is it supposed? Do you know what the word Commonwealth means? It means wealth that is shared. isn't it? Now you have a country that is where the Queen, the country of the Great Britain, trying to expel people so that they don't get to share the Commonwealth.
Reactions from Rwandans about the UK-Rwanda asylum deal. Let's bring in now immigration lawyer Nigel Farage, who's also been closely following the story. He's in London. Nigel, great to see you. And I'm sure that, the developments, especially with the Prime Minister's announcement on Saturday, I'm wondering, what were your initial thoughts with what he said?
Regarding, good afternoon, and good afternoon to your viewers. Yes, well, what the Prime Minister actually said about the Rwandan situation is quite clear, really. Is going to be, what he stated very clearly is that he's going to be getting rid of that Rwandan policy and Rwandan scheme. It's not going to work at all. And it's not going to work for, so many reasons. Which he stated whilst he was campaigning. First of all, the Rwandan scheme that the Tory party had in place and that the party wanted to implement if it had won the elections, that very particular scheme flouts international law, and it tramples so heavily on the UN Geneva Convention to do with refugees and the European Convention on Human Rights. And on two good occasions, the Court of Appeal and the Supreme Court stated very clearly that the scheme itself would breach international law and also breach the rights of people who would have been sent to Rwanda. So clearly, that the scheme would never actually have worked at all. And no surprise that the new Prime Minister has now decided to scrap that very particular policy.
Do you think for a second that perhaps if Rishi Sunak had remained as Prime Minister, maybe this was something he really didn't he didn't want this pinned on his legacy, given that, starting for the deal itself, the implementation of the deal, the first flights had been postponed and rescheduled, finally rescheduled to July 24th. And he went ahead with that, knowing that there would be an election. Well, he called a snap election earlier this month. Do you think that he probably foresaw what could happen? The fact that, the deal wouldn't even take off eventually?
There's no way I'll be able to get into the mind of the former Prime Minister. But what I could sense, or what I feel, was the fact that I think he was of the opinion, and I think he knew that that he might possibly lose the general election. Hence the reason why he decided to at least put a date to when he would want to actually start, sending people to Rwanda. And another reason, as much as he was banking on the fact that he might be able to win the elections, he made it very clear to the people, to the British people, that this is what he wanted to do with the Rwandan policy, to send people back to Rwanda, people who actually come to the UK illegally, back to Rwanda. But the people voted very heavily against the Tory party. They lost the elections, they lost their deposits, and it was a resounding victory actually for the Labour Party. So the fact that they voted for the Labour Party in the last general elections shows that I don't think the people were truly and really trusting his very particular Rwandan policy and the Rwandan scheme. Hence the reason why why so many people voted against the Tory party. So in effect, I'm not sure whether it would have worked at all, really. And I suspect he knew that he would not. There's a chance that he might not be able to win the general elections.
Yes, and the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer's announcement must have also come as a delight to rights groups and advocacy groups who had spoken about this deal, many of them against it in the first place. Um, what is the conversation amongst the British people now that, the Prime Minister has said the deal is scrapped? What does Britain do now?
Well, the British people generally, I'm not sure whether they are very keen on this Rwandan scheme any longer, to be honest with you. I think they got so many other problems that are bothering them at this point. You got the cost of living crisis, you got the economy not particularly doing well. Hence the reason why they voted very, overwhelmingly for the Labour Party to come back to power. Indeed, there were so many British people who are totally, up until this minute, who are still totally against immigrants. But the fact that they voted overwhelmingly for the Labour Party to come back to power, despite the fact that they are so anti-immigrant, shows that I don't think they were very, very particularly bothered about about the immigrant situation in the UK. All they just want anyway is a very, very better standard of living. The fact that they want the new government right now to get on with the economic crisis in the country, and what so many people are truly really going through the NHS, they need that to be resolved too. They need people to at least be able to live respectfully, with dignity. I don't think they voted for the Labour Party to deal with the immigration situation as it stands at this point in time. All they want is a good life for themselves, hence the reason why they voted, for the Labour Party to come back to power.
Yes, and it does seem that Keir Starmer is revisiting Britain's other decisions as well. He has touched on Brexit, saying that that Britain can, renew its partnership with the EU. I'm wondering if this is a case of buyer's remorse. I mean, the UK is out of the European Union, so why bring up the issue again with Brexit?
Well, you remember that about 8 years ago, when the Brexit election took place in 2016, Keir Starmer, the new Prime Minister, was remaining in the UK, the UK remaining within the EU. He also campaigned for a second referendum, but the decision of the British people was that, look, we don't really want to be part of the EU any longer. Hence, we want out. So I don't think the new Prime Minister would be thinking of rejoining either the EU or the common market at all, or the customs union. I don't think he's particularly interested in doing that, because the people clearly stated in 2016 that they're not interested in being part of the EU. But what I think he would want to do is to have a closer relationship with the EU. He would at least want to have a very, very clear, good security pact with the EU. He would want to have various situations and a very, very good cooperation with the EU to do with trade, to do with commerce, to do with technology, to do with security, to do with keeping Europe safe, the climate change. These are very close. These are things that he would want to put in place to at least have a very far better relationship with the EU compared to what the last Tory party had with the EU. It's going to be in the interest of the UK for him to do that. And he would also want to be very clear. I mean, there are so many, that very, very botched UK EU deal that was brokered so many years ago. I suspect that Keir Starmer would want to visit that very particular deal and possibly improve on that deal, because that deal wasn't good enough for good trade, and commerce in between the UK and the EU.
Yes.
So he would also be working on that too, I suspect.
And over the weekend, we saw him making his UK tour. He was in Northern Ireland. I think Scotland was the first country that he visited. What do you make of this visit, especially happening very early on in his prime ministership?
The Labour Party has a policy of not wanting to encourage another referendum in Scotland. Yes, he visited the First Minister of Scotland to again try to establish and predicate a very, very good relationship in between the British government in the UK, in England, and the Scottish government in Scotland. Again, there are so many problems being shared by both Scotland and the UK and England. And for that reason, yes, it was right for him to have visited Scotland. And I think he also did the same with Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
And I think he did the same with Wales. Again, if the union is to work properly, it was right and proper that he made this visit to all these three nations within the UK. He wants, as he very clearly stated in his whilst he was campaigning, he wants unity, he wants change, and he wants to do things quite differently compared to what we had when we had the Rishi Sunak Tory government in power. Of course, he's doing something quite different at this point in terms of at least making the union work properly.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dayo, for going through these issues with us. We appreciate your analysis on the world today.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.